Welcome to another episode of The Impact of AI, where each week we explore how AI impacts us both personally and professionally. Podcast this week is supported by WILDA, Women Leaders in Data and Artificial Intelligence. And today we have a most interesting topic brought to you by all the way from India, Divya, Dwivedi. You're laughing at me
Yeah.
now.
No, I'm not laughing at you. I'm happy that you pronounce my name properly.
Thanks so much. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
As I look at your LinkedIn, you have a very fascinating background, a very lengthy background, both in education and in the legal profession. And then also, later on in this conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about something you're doing more recently within the AI and the certification realm. Would you take a moment just to give us some overview of your background and your journey to where you are today?
First of all, thank you for inviting me just by looking at the certifications I've done. But my journey has been kind of a very subtle one. I won't say a roller coaster ride, but I have enjoyed my journey, at least professionally and personally both. From the very early days, I was okay at maths. I would say good from the perspective of marks. So I ended up in engineering, and that was the time when India just started to have AI understanding. So for me, AI was neural networks at that time. But later, since AI winters arrived, so we did not have much to do in that. So I moved on and did my MBA, and MBA was in international business. Somehow I got a good understanding of corporate law, how business works, and other things. But that prompted me to do more of social work rather than corporate work. So I moved on and started my NGO. It's a very small one, but we try to make people aware about their rights, especially in health rights, how legal rights work, what they can do best to promote their life in a better way. We do all the kind of awareness camps, especially with relation to women and children, because they are the most vulnerable, considered that they do not get all kind of uh, knowledge, I would say, though they get the education, but then the kind of stream they should choose. If a person is good at physics, they should choose science, but then at times school does not provide them that, so we try and provide that. But that somehow prompted me to do law. So I ended up doing law from the one of the most premier institutes in India, that's called Indian Institute of Technology. And that actually changed the whole scenario of how I was looking at the social service. That was very specific about intellectual property rights, then artificial intelligence, and how human rights around AI works. And that actually gave me a way and understanding as in how to move forward and do something in technology law. So I still do my social work, but I do it through technology help. And that was the thing which gave me an opportunity to interact with so many international people. And one of them is For Humanity. And For Humanity is the one which provides AI audit certification. And that's one which you saw in my profile and got interested in inviting me. It is run by Ryan, and he's one of the most humble people I know. He actually makes everyone join this particular For Humanity group and make sure that everyone is actually being taught in the similar manner, so that whatever we understand from our geography or from our culture, from our diversity, we can put it in. And AI audit, I would say, is a very simple concept. Like audit is for tax people, but to explain it, I think Ryan would have been the better person. I'm just his student, but I would love to explain that. That is one group which I work with. Another group where I contribute is MKAI in UK. They are kind of a huge inclusive community again for artificial intelligence, and there we can talk about n number of topics. One of them is my kind of favorite is how AI and gender equality works, how AI and spirituality works, how morality will affect AI. So all these topics are quite fascinating, and not everyone likes to talk about. But then these are the groups which actually help me think in a very diverse manner. Like this certification gave me an opportunity that you called me for a podcast. I was fascinated. There are other groups as well, and one of them is CAIDP. It's in US. It's run by Mark and I'm sorry, Marv. Marv was there. She invited me for a fall session. I did that. That is for Center of AI and digital policies, and they talk about AI governance. Best part of that group is we get to read so much. We get a huge perspective as in where AI governance is moving towards, how digital governance can be taken care of, and they do a lot of proposals for governments as well. So I got to learn from them as well. So I have been learning a lot, and that's what is making me contribute to the society as much as possible. That's my small journey which I can share with you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. You're quite busy. I'd like to just step back briefly to your current role, the one that pays the bills. You are an advocate for the Supreme Court of India. You've been doing that for about 3 years now. And the reason I want to step back is because the influence that you have going forward is a consolidation of this legal background that you have combined with your passion and the education that you have with AI. So let's talk a little bit about are there AI types of litigation that you're involved in? Are you starting to see
No.
more of this coming through the courts?
Not yet.
Not yet?
We expect it to happen sooner, but then what pays my bill is mostly intellectual property cases, especially patent drafting and stuff like that. Stuff like trademark filing and copyright infringement cases. All those cases are there, but AI is just picking up. So cases related to AI infringement or related to AI is not coming up yet in the courts, but then AI patents definitely are working. So I've been working on some software patents which are related to AI, but not developed by AI like it happened in South Africa or Australia or even UK. So we are still waiting for those, but this definitely helps me. And paying bills is quite easy when you are sitting at Supreme Court. And with the grace of God, I do have my seniors to help me with. I usually do the drafting work for constitutional law cases and other stuff in court.
You mentioned a moment ago AI in software. So here in the States, we call that, particularly if it's in healthcare, if we have AI that's being infused in digital imaging, then we list that as software as a medical device, where the
Mhm.
AI is inside the technology of that imaging. Is that what you're referencing? Something
Not
similar?
exactly.
Okay.
I have not yet drafted that kind of patent. What
Hmm.
I have drafted is more related to some stuff which AI has developed, say some kind of development which it has done for a mechanical work or for a sphere. Say, I can give you a small example, like if there is a nut and it has been developed by some artificial intelligence programming, that kind of development of patent I have filed. So that is the kind of work which I have done. Patent infringements in India are a little different from what happens in US. That is in very advanced stages. We are not at that level, but definitely we have a different kind, a set of cases. Like in patent specifically, the patent infringement in pharmaceuticals are quite different in India because we have very rigid patent regime. We do not allow any kind of admixtures to be patented at all. So if that doesn't happen, pharma cases will always be different from what is there in US. So that's what we see in India.
I'm going to ask a slightly shifting, still kind of in the legal perspective, but more related to the contract law.
Mhm.
So as we've continued to think about the impact of AI, how we need to evaluate AI in services. Is the product or service really using AI, even though someone says they're using AI? And then as we're starting to evolve that vision, now I'm getting similar kind of thoughts and questions around, well, how am I supposed to think about AI when it comes to contracting? Like before when we talked about SLAs, I understood what that meant because I understood the product and the services. But as we move forward with new products and services with this new AI technology, and AI is still very broad in its definition, how is how is that? I'd be interested in your thoughts. How that's going to impact contracts going forward.
So I want to understand this aspect. Are you talking about the digital world, or are you talking about the smart contracts, if I'm understanding you right? Or are you talking about the whole cyberspace and how contracts are going to work in that? Because in physical world, we are very clear how contracts work. Especially contract laws are almost similar in all the jurisdictions, almost
Mm-hmm.
similar. But if you're talking about digital spaces and the contracts, how they can respond in case of AI or maybe cyberspaces, the kind of smart contracts which are now coming up, we are not clear about the jurisdictions yet unless it has been specifically stated, and that is the place where people are playing the games, I would say. Why? Because if you have not written properly that this is the jurisdiction which we will belong to in case if we are working in a cyberspace. So that makes the whole contract, I would say, not usable or maybe voidable, but not totally void because work is happening based on that particular contract. For
Mm-hmm.
me, contract is a very simple understanding. It is about an agreement in between, say, you and me. And if you're sitting in US and India, I'm in India. So if we do not decide where this case will be filed in case of any dispute, how are we going to draft that particular contract? In itself, contract will be of no use if we do not write the jurisdiction itself. You can find a central point. You can get a neutral territory as a dispute resolution place, and that's where the beauty of arbitration and dispute resolution is coming up. If I have understood your question correctly, I may be wrong, but then I thought you were talking about smart contracts, so I just took that particular aspect because I do a lot of work in arbitration and dispute resolution as well. So I thought better to bring up that topic.
No, that's great. I think that that works really well. So what I'm understanding is if you and I, for example, are putting together a contract where there is a service or product that has an AI component to it, then it's not just a matter of how you and I agree to define that, but
Mhm.
also where the jurisdiction is. And more
Absolutely.
importantly, depending on the jurisdiction, so let's say not just the US or India, but say the US and Australia, it's
Mhm.
really understanding how the legal course or recourse, as well as what you just mentioned for arbitration, how that differs when each of those jurisdictions.
Because all of us have different arbitration laws.
Hmm.
That is why everyone is trying to get a common ground, even in arbitration. That's what WIPO is working on. That's what several other seats are working on. That there should be a common space where you can have the dispute resolution because disputes are arising and it's going on international courts. But there is a very big limitation to any kind of court. They cannot do unlimited work. So we have to find a middle ground where you do not need to go to court, spend that much. You can rather sit with an arbitrator and find a solution that will also be equally imposed as it would have been by the court. But in dispute resolution, there is something called mediation also. When you talk about mediation, mediation is something which is not being imposed in the similar manner, but then there is a mediator who sits in between two parties and tries to resolve the matter. If matter is resolved, then obviously both the parties save the money, and it's a huge amount of money. It's not like a little amount of money you just spend it and you come back and like you spend something on McDee's and come back and just don't think about it. But bigger companies, bigger businesses, they do lose a lot of money when they go to courts. That's why probably all lawyers, they are now trying to push their clients towards either arbitration, and if not arbitration, specifically mediation, because mediation is one of the more cheaper aspects of I don't know if you have read about negotiations yet or not, but then I'm pretty sure you must have. Harvard has been working tirelessly on negotiations for so long. For them, negotiation is something which saves you time, saves you traveling, saves you money, and actually gives you peace of mind. So that is something which at least me and many lawyers they are trying to do, so that you can serve the client better. And if you are talking about AI, like even if artificial intelligence work is happening, if you're talking about two entities sitting in two continents, wouldn't it be better to resolve the matter through a mediator via Zoom call rather than flying down somewhere, finding a common ground, being there and spending even in hotels? I'm just giving a very cheaper example, but I'm trying to uh, differentiate in between the kind of investments which we used to have before COVID, which now we do not want to have after COVID. And this, I feel that this has impacted our lives in a very different manner, because after COVID, people have started accepting online meetings as they used to think about physical meetings. So it has become a little bit easier to convince them. I feel arbitration and mediation are the kind of upcoming field and absolutely helpful. At least you don't have to go to courts for that.
That makes sense. It sounds like this is still very fluid, not just here in the US and India, but from what I understand, very fluid globally. I'm going to read to you something. Are you familiar with digital rights?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have
Would
read about it. It's like it's a concept. It came around in 2014, 15, I think, if I'm right.
right. So I'm going to read to you digital
Mhm,
rights,
mhm,
legal rights, allowing the individual to use, access, create, and publish digital media. And
mhm,
at the time, it was really specific around the use of the internet.
mhm.
But this concept has come up a lot more in its association with AI. So I was interested if you had some thoughts. Again,
Okay.
everything that we're talking about is emerging and fluid, but at the moment, you seem to be further along than some of us are.
Oh my God. That's something which we have to understand before even we talk about digital rights.
Hmm.
Everything which we are talking about, like you rightly said, it's totally fluid and it's really upcoming. But digital rights is not something which is only restricted to that. There is something called digital rights management, which talks about even the infringement of intellectual property, which comes under that particular management. So if there is a concept of digital rights management, there definitely is digital rights which is accepted everywhere. Even in India, we do have privacy rights. They also come under digital rights. If we have a authority, a right to use internet, that means we have equal right to privacy as well. So frankly, if you see that particular umbrella of privacy, digital rights, for me, they come under that. Digital rights is not something which is very, very different. It's very common right which we are born with. Like now, kids are born with that particular right. They have a right to use the internet. The moment you have a right to use the internet, it has become a human right. Now you have a digital right as well. Usually people get confused. Why? Because they think that digital rights is something to do only with cyberspaces. No,
Mm.
if it is affecting your body, your brain, your whole thought process, it is affecting your rights as well. So kind of infringement of that particular right also should be taken in the same manner as it would have infringed the human right. So for me, digital rights have always existed since the time at least we have internet and most of the people have access to it. Earlier, everyone did not had that access, but then at least in India now, I can say more than 90% have access to internet right now, and we are the country which has the cheapest internet access right now. So all of us know how to use a smartphone and how to get and gain access to news and other things. So we practically are using our digital rights. And when you talk about writing on media like Twitter or other social media accounts, definitely that gives rise to what sphere you're talking about. But for me, digital rights will remain not that active in India till the time we have our personal data protection bill active. We only have Information Technology Act, which takes care of all our rights for the time being, but we are expecting our digital rights definitely by this year end. Hope so. So that's how India is.
I appreciate you helping us understand that. Thank you. So if we now that we have this foundation of your background and the legal side of your journey, I'm going to shift more towards the present, where you've gotten back into AI policy. So, for example, you've got your AI policy clinic at the Center of AI and Digital Policy. You've gotten a lot of other volunteer work that you're doing in the space and combining the two passions together. But more specifically, there's this recent certification in AI auditing, and I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, so for that, I'll have to explain what For Humanity does.
Okay.
So let me give you a little overview about what For Humanity does.
Hmm.
The mission of For Humanity, which was founded by Ryan Carrier in 2016, their mission talks about how to examine and analyze the downside risks associated with the advances of AI, algorithmic and autonomous systems. So what he has done is tried to accommodate whole of the AI with algorithmic and autonomous system and to engage and find that risk mitigation and optimum outcome for humanity by the help of For Humanity group. So this community, what we do is we sit together, we try and find ways as in how to keep AI ethical, how it is based on five pillars. Basically it talks about ethics, biases, privacy, trust and cybersecurity, and it talks about the kind of risk which people may face if any of these have been infringed. So we basically have focus on that, and there should always be a kind of governance aspect when we are talking about all these five pillars, and there should be an accountability which should be given. For us, accountability will definitely come from what we talk about in audit systems. If there is an independent audit done for that particular system, trust definitely will be gained by the public, for the public, and by the people who are auditing that particular system. So that's where this particular aspect of independent audit of AI systems came into picture, where it's not only him, it's a whole group which talks about all these things. And what I understood from AI auditors, the kind of audits which we do, what they do have three characteristics basically, where they are to be done by a certified practitioner. It should use some third party or independent audit criteria. There should be no oversight by the people who are being audited. The auditee should be independent and should not have any bias. And then the kind of relationship that auditee has with the auditor, because if I know the auditee, there is a possibility that I will become biased or there will be some discrimination, because I know that person. If I have a belief that that person is very trustworthy, I'll always show that audits are being trusted. But if that person, I don't know the person and I'm being their auditor, I'll be non-biased. So that approach is what For Humanity has been talking about. And when I was doing the certification, my basic understanding for AI was okay, but then audit definitely got very enhanced. And now we are looking forward to three, four more certifications. Hopefully, we'll get that. Here, what happens is the audit criteria, it should be binary to become effective. What exactly is binary criteria? There should be no ambiguity, there should be no doubt, and there should be no uncertainty. So when all these things are being taken care of, then definitely you will gain trust, and that trust will give the rise to proper audit results. And since we talk about audit of humans or their companies, similar way For Humanity, we are talking about this AI systems audit. And once that is done properly, if AI system in itself is audited and it is trustworthy, it becomes more trustworthy for the people, we gain that particular trust. So this is what AI audit in the simplest word possible. But other than that, there is a 5-week course. Everyone is welcome to join it. You can always do it and give an exam and test how good you are at it after that. And there are two more courses which they propose. One of them is GDPR related. It is about UK GDPR bill. And then there is a code of ethics for children, as in how AI is affecting children as well. So you will definitely get a lot of aspects on For Humanity website. If you want, I can share the website as well, and you can enjoy as many classes there. And everyone is welcome to join For Humanity.
Thank you. We will definitely make sure that we get those links out when we publish this. The the type of audits you mentioned auditing the systems. So if I walk through a typical process, we've got the collection of data, we've got the segmentation, the cleansing, the transformation, the segmentation, the labeling of the data. Then it typically shifts over into individuals who have built their AI algorithms, that they're utilizing that data, consuming it, and then they're testing it. And then at some point, it would eventually, go to production and be live for the public consumption. What part of that process are you auditing?
Practically, what Rand told us is everything, I would say,
Hmm.
because that is what will gain trust.
Okay.
Our own whole soul criteria is based on getting ethical AI, bias free AI, then it should be privacy prone, then it should be trustworthy, and it should be cyber secure. So once you want to gain trust, all the parts should be audited equally in the same non-biased manner. And that's what I have understood. I'm talking about my
Hmm.
understanding. It's nothing to do with what Foyman has taught. But what I understood is we have to be very, very diligent when we are doing it, and there should be no cross between auditor, auditee, and the auditee who will be coming later. Because if the moment the auditor has given a baton to the other auditor and told that person that that auditee, I know him, please be careful, you are definitely passing on some bias. So for me, doing that is what is affecting the whole process. And that's what happens when humans are doing the audits. So in case if you are doing the same thing with AI audit systems, then again we are putting in the same biases. We are passing on the same biases. Because when you see AI, any AI system, it is generated with the basis of data, the kind of data we put in. So if we have put in a biased data of audit itself, it is going to affect the AI audit system as well. So this is totally my understanding, and I believe I may be wrong, but then I believe that currently I'm right.
Yeah, you're perfect. Thanks. If I look at the audit process, because you mentioned auditing the process itself. So
Mhm,
for example, if I have a financial services institution
mhm,
and they have built out their internal group that has, the data scientist and the AI developers, um, as as they go through this process, they could be
mhm,
pushing out multiple products,
mhm.
multiple results of that. So my question is, every time they build a new product, would that require another audit, or are you auditing that process itself so that no matter what flows through that process, it highlights where the gaps are so that they can resolve it? I just wanted to clarify it to make sure I understood.
Okay, in that case, I'll also have to get back to the whole 5-week course, because what I remember is it is done once a year.
Hmm.
And if there is new process which is being introduced, there is a possibility of getting it done only if suits a certain criteria,
Right.
because there will be different committees which will be formed during that particular audit process, which For Humanity proposes.
Hmm.
So the kind of help, the kind of teaching and guidance which we do for people, like me being an auditor, me being an certificate holder of foundation of this particular course, I will be teaching other person the similar thing. But then all those committees should be clear about what process are they going to audit. But what I remember is it is done yearly, if it is necessary and very important at that particular point of time, that audit can be done. But I think it should be done by a different auditor so that there is no bias creation in between.
Now,
But I may be wrong at that point. Please forgive me for that. I'll have to check it.
no, that makes sense, because if I apply that to my background, it would make sense to audit the process itself. And then it sounds like the expectation is with any audits, there's not necessarily an expiry date, but perhaps just like we have an audit, for invoicing, or, we have internal or external regulators that come in and do audits. In healthcare, we typically have every 5 years. Those processes are getting, so that completely makes sense. I just want to make sure that I've asked all the questions that I could think of that some of the folks listening would be wanting to understand from you.
No, please, please, even after this, if you want to shoot any questions, I'll be happy to answer after reading, of course, because
Yes.
I don't want to be wrong. So,
You recently went to the AI policy clinic for the Center of AI and Digital Policy. Can you
mhm.
talk a little bit more about your work there?
Oh wow, we did a country report on Cambodia over there, and the experience you want, I'll take just a minute and I'll share a particular website, and that website in itself will show what my experience would have been, because this institution itself, it has become so big
Mhm.
and it is so prominent now because the professors who are there and the AI ethicists who are there, they are tirelessly working on towards AI governance, towards AI ethics. So if you don't mind, I would like to share the website.
Yeah, so I can read off. So the Center of AI and Digital Policy aims to ensure that artificial intelligence and digital policies promote a better society, more fair, more just, and more accountable. A world where technology promotes broad social inclusion based on fundamental rights, democratic institutions, and the rule of law. This is an independent nonprofit corporation. The Center for AI and Digital Policy brings together world leaders, innovators, advocates, thinkers, and to promote established frameworks for AI policies, including the OECD AI principles and the Universal Guidelines for AI.
Okay, so I'll talk about Mark Rottenberg.
Yes.
I am fascinated by the work which he does. He has
Mhm.
written so much about AI and how to make it more trustworthy, how to make sure that the policies are around it are more governed by privacy policies, by it should be helpful for the society for him. And what I have understood by doing all these things, I realize that even if you are making some policies, for the government is making the policies, they should be very clear about how is it going to affect the values, the society itself. What Mark talks about is mostly democratic values and artificial intelligence. And recently in 2021, they released a whole write up about it, and I'll just give me a second. Let me open that particular page because I do a lot of reading around them. And recently, I was doing this summer courses where they used to give everyone one paper which we had to present. And I was fortunate to do it on AI governance. That was also a very big learning experience. That was done by Dr. Lauren Kisselberg, and she is with Purdue University. And the concept which we were working on was again around digital policy and how AI works and how it affects the whole political scenario. Does politics affect AI? That also is talks about how social justice works, how AI is being biased, or how to take away bias from AI. So we have been talking a lot about it as well. But what I have learned from CIDP is basically the concept about AI governance. How governance will affect AI, how much we can govern AI. Should we govern AI that much or not? And about digital policies, what they say is if you're talking about digital policies, this should include each and every community. It should be culture based, it should be demography based, it should be gender based, because more you are away from all these aspects, more you'll not understand exactly how AI is going to react. So that is what Mark, even Merv, she talks about. She is the one who introduced me to this. Merv Hickok, she is the senior research director and one of the most humble persons I have met. She specifically talks about AI ethics, and she is an AI ethicist. So, how ethical AI should be is what she talks about. So, I'll tell you what I learned from her.
Mhm.
Is I always had this chat with her around ethics and morality. For me, the moment ethics and morality comes into picture, spirituality also is somewhere. And spirituality not in sense of religion, but spirituality just in sense of attaining peace, attaining that particular moment where you are peaceful enough to think about everything and yourself at the same platform. So when I used to talk about this, that's time when she invited me to join this particular group, and we had a 3 month course, and there we presented the country reports. There were 12 points which we had to specifically check. I want to read those points to you, if you don't mind, if you
Go
have
ahead.
some time.
Yeah.
Yeah, just give me a second, Manish. Okay, so we do have a matrix which was given to us by CIDP, where we had to fill the analysis for it. So when we were doing this Columbia report, just a moment, the questions were, how has the country endorsed the OECD AI principles? Is the country implementing it? Has the country endorsed the UDHR? Is the country implementing the UDHR? Because see, when we are talking about AI principles or OECD AI principles, how is UDHR getting affected, or is UDHR specifically Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is that affecting our AI principles? So we try to understand that as well, and whether a country has implemented it or not. Then there was a question called, has the country established a process for meaningful public participation in development of national AI policy? This meant that if public is being asked when we are developing in any AI policy, has public been asked by the country? Because that also makes a lot of difference when you are developing the particular AI policy for the whole country. They should be involved. There should be questionnaires floated by the government itself so that they get the good answers or whatever answers public gives, because you cannot reach each and every person immediately. It is a long course of time, and India being a huge country here, this will definitely be helpful. Then there was a question, are materials about the country's AI policy and practices readily available to public? Because that also gains trust. If it is readily available, everyone can read and they can try and understand why these policies are being raised, or we are trying to make those policies. Then a question was, does the country have an independent agency or mechanism for AI oversight? Now they were talking again about, do the following goals appear in the national AI policy, specifically fairness, accountability, transparency, specifically talking about rule of law, how fundamental rights are affected, how the enforcement is done for those legal entities. Has the country by law established a right to algorithmic transparency? So all these questions, they were catered in that particular country report. The moment you're talking about all these and you're talking about social contracts for AI, then you're talking about country's data protection agency, has there been any sponsor about that? Is AI ethics being involved in that particular data protection bill or not? Because we right now are trying to make every jurisdiction on equal pedestal. If we are there, then there is a possibility of growth for all the countries at the similar platform. Though it is not a very easy task, but everyone is trying to move towards that. So that is how CIDP gave me a clearer picture of understanding of AI, specifically when it comes to governance, digital policies, and making those policies, and how government should have that approach. So for me, that was a very huge learning process. And then we had the summer course where we had different articles by different writers every week, and some or the other of us, so we were 20 people, and all of us had 1 week to take forward the discussion. And for me, it was AI governance, and I surely enjoyed it.
I think what we've learned today is that when we look at AI from a legal perspective, from a contractual perspective, from a policy perspective, that globally, we are still very much in the emerging stages, in the early stages, and we should expect that this continues to be very fluid, meaning that it's going to wiggle one way and then possibly turn the next way, until we get more precedents that can help establish some sort of ongoing foundation.
Absolutely.
All right, that's my
But
takeaway
what
today.
I feel, all these groups, they are contributing to all this, because
Mhm.
the more we talk about, there is a possibility of us reaching to a final destination. But if we don't even talk about it, how will we reach anywhere? So somehow at
And
least talks are helping us.
and that's why you're here today, to
Yeah.
help us expand the conversation.
Thank you.
We are wrapping up today. We're coming to the end. Is there anything, with all of your knowledge that you've accumulated over the last couple years, is there anything that you'd like to, any thoughts, any left behind thoughts?
Yeah, my favorite topic, I couldn't say anything about, that is gender equality. And when I started talking about it, I realized that gender equality is nowhere to be found. But here, when you invited me, I thought I'll talk more about that. But then we just started talking about the certifications and other stuff. But what I feel, that more technology is in picture for life or human, there is a possibility of us getting that gender equality aspect sooner than later. Because especially when we are 49% in the world, still we are trying to understand why we are not on top. I'm not saying every female should be on top, but then at least we should have a fair competition. It's like there are, if 100 men are there, there are two women, and they are just promoted because they are women. No, but they are working more than what men can, because they are not only working in offices, they work at their homes as well. They take care of their kids as well. And it's on the same story for every man. I can say proudly about a couple of men whom I know, but I feel that we should support women more. We should support gender equally, but then I feel that women really need a little bit of more push from everyone. And that's what my thought for today is. Even if we are talking about audit,
Yeah.
or if we are talking about digital policies, or if we are talking about AI governance, everything should lead somewhere towards gender equality, because that is something which will make us achieve that particular humanity platform much easily than what we are trying to. So
Do
that's
you
pretty much
have
what I feel.
do you have a few suggestions on how we can push that forward?
By introducing women to technology more,
Hmm.
because there is a misconception in everyone that if a girl is doing some work which is more homely, at least in India I can talk about that, if they are teachers or they are not science driven, they will be more homely. So we do not talk more about science for girls, but the question power, it rises. Even if you're talking about any science subject, it's not like everyone is made for that. Every boy is also not excelling in STEM courses. But then what I feel is science and technology definitely is making a lot of difference. So if we can make sure that technology in the right way, right manner is reaching humanity, it will be helping humanity as well. So it should be rightly used, not only for entertainment purposes, as it is happening in younger generations right now. So that's what I feel.
Perfect. Thank you. Divya, thank you so much for setting aside an hour of your time today.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for
And
inviting
we
me. Thank you so
absolutely
much.
look forward to reaching out to you again as you continue to progress in your legal and AI fields of knowledge. Yes,
Anytime. If I learn anything more, I'll let you know for sure.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Look forward to it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.